Segment 3, Gold and Black Live, joined by Brian Newbert and Tom Dienhart. We look forward to tomorrow's game in East Hartford, Connecticut. The Boilermakers take on Connecticut, a UConn team, Tom, that in the FBS, they would be at the very bottom. There's no other way to say it. It has struggled mightily. They've gone through turmoil of a coaching change. Jeff Brahms said Thursday night that he's got to have his team on alert. You'd asked him about bringing their own juice to keep enthusiasm, because they're going to have a ladies' day crowd, so to speak, of 15, 16,000 there. This is going to be a challenge in its own right to how Purdue prepares and executes in a game that it should win by 4 or 5 touchdowns.
Yeah, I mean, like you alluded to, Alan, the atmosphere there is probably not going to be real electric. You're going to have to self-motivate, as they like to say, bring your own juice, as you alluded to. Sometimes these situations just aren't ideal. When you're a heavy favorite, everybody expects you to take care of business in a convincing fashion. I mean, there's some pressure in that. And you're not supposed to just win. You're supposed to kill them, right? And Purdue's, I think last I checked, a 34-point favorite. And, as Jeff talked about on Thursday, he expects UConn to empty their chest here and try to do some different things, anything, guys, to try to gain some edge. I mean, the odds are stacked against them. So what does UConn have to lose? Absolutely nothing. So if you're Purdue, I think you want to come out and like I've said, just punch these guys in the nose right away. If there's any spirit in them, take it out of them right away. Maybe they'll fold their 10 up quickly here, and Purdue can have a nice, easy Saturday afternoon. So it'll be interesting to see how the Boilermakers do come out, guys. And, lastly here, this looks like a good chance for Purdue to maybe work in more players in the rotations. And specifically, I think, try to run the football, see if they can get physical up front and have just a glorious day of pounding Xander Horvath and King DeRue and Dylan Downing and company, and try to get some confidence with that ground game, because they're going to need it moving forward, beginning with Notre Dame the week after this game.
I have a point to make real quick before you ask me a question. Are we sure the crowd's not going to be that good? Because
maybe it will.
I could see a lot of Purdue people showing up, because every November I go to these basketball events all over the place, and Purdue always turns out better than everyone else, other than like Kentucky or whoever else might be at the event, because Purdue might not have a national fan base, so to speak, but they have a national alumni base. And all those engineers in New York City and all those pharmaceutical people in Jersey, they don't get to see Purdue football play very often. And I could see a lot of East Coast Purdue people showing up for this game. Now, granted, they're probably not doing cartwheels to go see UConn play, but I could see a decent amount of Purdue people showing up, at least a meaningful amount of Purdue people showing up. So it's conceivable that UConn could get a little bit of a road team bump here from an attendance perspective, which they might need to keep Division I eligibility when all is said and done after this season, because you have to average more than $15,000 per game, and we'll see where they go from here. But I sort of wonder if there won't be I guess Purdue
don't need to bring their own juice, so they'll get juiced up by the Purdue crowd there.
Yeah, I mean, I think Purdue will have, and historically, again, you're right. They haven't played New England since 1947. So if you're a Boston Purdue grad or somebody from Connecticut, or it's not all that far from New York City, I think Purdue will have a couple thousand, 3,000 or 4,000 people there, but I think UConn may have about 10,000 if they're lucky. I know they had 17,000 last week against Holy Cross. I think it was, or 18,000 in that game. But you're right. I mean, this is a rare opportunity. We talked earlier that Purdue had Boston College on the schedule for a while, for about 3 or 4 years. They were going to go to Boston College, and then that game got nixed. I don't know can't remember what happened to it, but it is a rare
non-conference games last year.
Yeah, well, but they have had. It is a rare opportunity, obviously, for Purdue to play in that part of the country. Brian, you look at this game too, and can you see things? What's to be gained? What does Purdue need to do to say, it got out of East Hartford with a constructive, productive performance, what would that look like from your perspective?
I think you just want to be a little bit better than you were against Oregon State. Obviously you kind of grade on a curve based on the level of competition, but you remember last year Purdue started 2-0, but it was like halftime of that Illinois game when things started to turn a little bit. Remember Illinois rallied in the second half and kind of left you with that feeling like Purdue was just damn lucky to get the hell out of there with a win. You'd like to not walk away, questioning yourself in any way, shape, or form. You don't necessarily need to win by 50, but it would be good, presumably. And I've obviously never played, high level college football, but I would think human nature would be the better you play, the more convincing it is, the better you feel about yourself going to Notre Dame. I just think that not making a lot of mistakes, staying healthy, obviously, which bears mentioning after every game, but especially a game like this that, the stakes are so, low in certain ways. I just think you just want to be a little bit better than you were in week one. You just want to walk away with a good feeling about yourself.
Now, UConn has changed, Tom. They're going to change quarterbacks. They've got injuries, their best receivers out, et cetera. This is not it's a program that didn't play last year. I mean, you can't think of a much more problematic situation for a team that is playing its second home game in 3 weeks.
Yeah, you're right. Cameron Ross, their best receivers out. Actually, the two top receivers are out.
Yeah.
Changing quarterbacks. The head coach obviously is quit. And you name it. This team seems to be plagued with it. Coming off also that dubious loss at home to FCS Holy Cross. So nothing seemingly is pointing up for Connecticut with the Boilermakers coming to town. So again, a great opportunity for Purdue to gain some more confidence. I think it was nice last week. They had to respond to a little bit of adversity, and the offense came to life when the chips were down in the fourth quarter. Maybe this week, guys, they can just gain some swagger, if you will. I know UConn's bad. We all know that, but still, sometimes it's nice to have a laugher. I went back and looked at Jeff Brom's 4 most decisive wins as Purdue coach, and twice he's beaten an opponent by 30 points. Each time was on the road, as a matter of fact, coincidentally. 2018 at Illinois, I think it was 46-7.
46-7, that's right.
Yeah, 2017 at Missouri, 35-3. So he's had some luck, scoring a couple road wins by over 30 points. And, again, maybe he can add this to his resume here. Like I said, a chance to, like I said, gain some confidence, gain some swagger as you're heading into that tough matchup next week at South Bend. And then you come home to play Illinois, and then you play Minnesota for homecoming. Then you're off. So, I've said it before, a lot of people have, that this is a great opportunity for Purdue to get win number 2 and get some confidence and maybe set up what could be a very nice start to this program into the 2021 season.
Yeah, that Missouri game, I'm just thinking, Brian, Drew Lock, David Blau was running circles around. I mean, that was an amazing game in its own way. I mean, and a road 35-3 road win there. Of course, Missouri came back the next week and beat Purdue, but I digress. This is, again, you look at what you saw last week, Brian. I mean, obviously we talked about the resiliency and some things that went well. Now looking back at it through the lens of 5 or 6 days later, takeaways from that game, and what do you hope to have walking into the Notre Dame game outside of being 100% healthy? What can Jalen Graham or Corey Trice or somebody or George Karlaftis do against UConn that might help Purdue against Notre Dame?
Well, I mean, you still don't have a tremendous background with success with this group on this roster right now. I think the more they experience winning, the more, they probably learn in some small way how to do more of it, how to handle it, how to handle success. I guess. I mean,
we're working to fill time here.
We're doing the same thing the coaches are doing. Like, when
Yeah.
you talk about UConn, you got to say something. And like when Jeff Brom talks about how if we don't play well, we're going to get beat. Well, yeah, I mean, theoretically, but what else is he going to say? He can't say anything other than that. And I just think playing well and executing well and getting more comfortable with what you're doing and getting more comfortable in your roles in this new defense and, you know, with what they're doing offensively this year, getting a little bit more maybe, you know, belief in the guy behind center. I thought the fourth quarter of the Oregon State game was huge from potentially from the angle of people believing in Jack Plummer, because, you know, he's not won a lot of games at Purdue in his time on the field. And it's the single most important position in sports, probably, where everybody on the field with you has to believe in you. And I think the fact that he delivered those 2 big touchdown drives in that fourth quarter, I think could be huge. So if he plays well again in this game, you know, it might not be the high stakes situation as the last game, but the more people around him, you know, garner belief in him, the better off this team's going to be long term, probably. You know, Jeff Brom mentions every time he talks about Jack Plummer, he mentions leadership. So I think, you know, Jack Plummer's already that guy everybody wants to succeed. But when they actually succeed with him on the field, I think that's kind of further validation that they can and will in their minds.
You know, I got to ask Tom on Thursday about, well, why in the heck does Purdue, of course, somebody was a fan that wasn't aware, I don't know exactly how they weren't aware that these games weren't scheduled like last year. You know, UConn, when Purdue's Morgan Burke and company scheduled, I think Danny Hope was the head coach, as I recall, when they scheduled UConn, they wanted to do what we talked about. That's play a game on the East Coast or in that Boston, Massachusetts, Connecticut area. UConn had been to, went to the Fiesta Bowl, right? I think about the time that Purdue scheduled. So Purdue fans need to be careful when you cast aspersions too far. UConn's been to a better bowls in from that standpoint compared to where Purdue has been. We know that the UConn's got major issues in rebuilding, if they can ever rebuild where they are in the marketplace. But this is an interesting sidelight that you schedule teams 10, 11 years before, and you think that they're going to be a certain thing but then by the time you get to them, sometimes things have changed.
Yeah. Edsel had a nice little run going there at UConn and during his first incarnation as head coach. When he first took over that program, it was actually 1AA, and he built it up. And I think he won 2 Big East titles in like a 3 or 4 year period. You talked about the Fiesta Bowl trip. That was the 2010 season. They played Oklahoma. They lost. And then Edsel left. He abruptly left right after that game to take the Maryland job. Didn't have much success there. Came back to Connecticut in 2017. And it's just been downhill since then. And now he's gone. And the school says they're committed to football. Some people think it's insane. They probably should drop back to the FCS level, if you will. But right now they're an independent basketball program is going back to the Big East. And I'm not sure who's going to get that job, but yeah, the scheduling to some Purdue fans may be curious. There's really nothing to gain for Purdue from ever going to a place like Connecticut. You know, Brian's talked about this a lot. Purdue will get out of the business of going to these type of schools, the Nevadas, the Rices, the Hawaiis, and now the Connecticut's, the Toledos. And obviously these days are over, and Purdue's success is, as you guys know, you lived it. You guys were at the games. I'm sure that they lost most of those games. They lost at Rice. They lost at Hawaii. They lost at Toledo. They lost at Nevada. And this is when you got to win. Again, it's really a no-win situation for Purdue. If they don't win enough, they're going to probably get criticized. And they're going to have to win substantially and impressively to probably impress a lot of the critics out there. But within those offices of the Kozich Performance Complex, again, they got the boxes they want to check. And of course, they just want to get the win, guys, and come out relatively healthy. And Brian talked about quarterback play and Jack Plummer. And I went back and we talked about the need for maybe elite quarterback play, or very, very good quarterback play. It's been elusive at Purdue for 15 or 20 years. looking up in the media guide, guys, the last time Purdue had a first team all Big Ten quarterback, 2004, Kyle Lorton. The last time Purdue had a second team all Big Ten quarterback, 1998, Drew Brees. Let that sink in for the cradle of quarterbacks. Now that's been a position that they've had some very good players, but they really haven't had any really great quarterback in quite some time, it seems like.
Yeah, Jack Plummer will have take one more step. He's now started. This will be starting his 11th game at Purdue. All right, Brian. Last word before we cut this segment.
One thing to add there, just real quick. I believe this was scheduled in 2018. So this was a Mike Babinski, Jeff Brom era series that was scheduled
that late.
Now it's
because they had to fill a game.
It's a home and home. So Purdue's going to UConn, and Connecticut, I think, is coming in 2025, something like that. Now you kind of wonder if that's going to happen. I don't think Purdue's going to back out of a home game, but with the whole move toward, Power 5 playing Power 5, that could be a consideration that if you need to replace that game with somebody more credible, maybe that gets, perhaps that crosses Mike Babinski's desk. Other part of it too is, look, I'm not saying that UConn's going to get punted out of Division I here, but where their football program is right now, undoubtedly from a revenue perspective, from an attendance perspective, from a competitive perspective, I don't know where they're going to be in a couple of years. And with the consolidation of power going on in Power 5, programs like UConn are going to be the collateral damage. Some of them are just going to disappear, or they're going to drop down to FCS, which I don't cover the Connecticut football program, but I just kind of looking at a lot of the way this is profiling. You don't have an on-campus facility. Your attendance is right on the borderline of what you need for Division I membership. I don't know where UConn's going to be here in a couple of years when they return that game. So we'll see, what kind of comes of that.
Hey, real quick, too, guys, we talked about the Boilers in the Northeast. In a few years, Purdue goes to Syracuse.
That's right.
Yeah. And Brian, I stand corrected, and you are 100% correct. They scheduled this game on November the 27th, 2018 is when it came. So they had some fill-in, and they are scheduling. You can mark your calendars now. September 13th, 2025. UConn is supposed to be in Ross-Ade Stadium. But you bring up a good point.
Now.
You bring up a very good point that makes it very, very interesting to see where the Huskies will
Call
be.
up the Purdue Union Club Hotel right now and get Hilton Garden Inn, one or the other.
Go
ahead and make your hotel reservations.
This one we better call the Hilton Garden Inn. But yeah, you're right, and that is an interesting part of this as well. Of course, Purdue has games scheduled through 2033. If you look at the Purdue future schedules, but that'll be 8 years after UConn. 2034. Ole Miss comes to Ross-Ade Stadium on October the 9th or September the 9th. So mark your calendars for that. So
it's gonna be it's gonna be pretty brutal here in a couple of years. I know how much you enjoy paying this fly me out to Maryland and Rutgers and Nebraska to cover Big Ten basketball games. Tom's going to be flying to like Oregon State and Washington State and Cal and Wake Forest and Syracuse and Florida State. And
Alan's going to be in Boca Raton, kickback retired by then.
Yeah, that may be the
playing
case.
shuffleboard, drinking.
I'm hoping they'll be.
Alan's going to be Secretary of Education by then.
Yeah, be Tallahassee. None of the above. Tallahassee, 2030 is what we're looking at, I think. So who knows from that standpoint. But one thing we do know, it will be interesting to see how all this college football world shakes out as time moves down the road. All right, guys, that's enough wisdom for one segment. We appreciate your input, Brian and Tom. I want to thank Gordon Jackson and Scott Sumner and the folks at WLFI for helping make this happen. Want to thank our sponsors too, Triple X and Hilton Garden Inn and State Farm agent Trent Johnson for their support. We'll be back next week as well, looking ahead to Purdue Notre Dame. So we'll have some fun. Want to also thank our earlier guest Joe Strickland and Tom Moreland. Really interesting stuff as well. And we'll look forward to Gold and Black Live. It'll be the day before Purdue and Notre Dame teed up for the first time in what now? Was it 5 years? No, 7 years, I should say.
22.
And when those two teams play. And the first time in 9 years in South Bend. So we'll look forward to that. Guys, have a great rest of the week. And all of you viewers and listeners, we appreciate you as well. Have a great weekend. Take care, all.